Or 129500 SL. Lovely. Hello there. Thank you for joining me. I am going to pop a man's face up on the screen. If you're a Formula 1 fan, you might recognize this man. And if you're not a Formula 1 fan, you probably have no idea who he is. So allow me to try and fill you in. His name is William Story, and he is the CEO of a company called Rich Energy. Now again, don't worry, if you've never heard of Rich Energy, that's not surprising. Although they claim to be one of the world's largest energy drink suppliers, they're a bit of an enigmatic brand. When you hear the words world's largest energy drink company, there's probably one brand that comes to mind, Red Bull. And Red Bull also happen to be a very successful Formula 1 team. They're the current Formula 1 world champions. And it's Red Bull who Rich Energy and William Story had their sights aimed at. They wanted to become the new Red Bull. So the company was founded in 2016 with William Story being a majority stakeholder and the CEO. He had a couple of anonymous minority stakeholders and another majority stakeholder, a man called David Sullivan. Don't worry, I had no idea who that guy was either. If you Google him, he comes up as a tabloid mogul / pornographer. Essentially, he owned a publication called The Daily Sport, which was, calling it sports media will be a bit strong. Essentially, it was 20 to 30 pages of weekly tits. It doesn't exist anymore for obvious reasons. We don't need to get into David Sullivan's story. I just wanted to give you a flavour of the kind of people you're dealing with in this Rich Energy story. So founded in 2016, and according to public records, the bank balance of Rich Energy in 2016 was £103, and that rose to £581 in 2017. Not exactly Formula 1 investment figures you would imagine. I have £581, and I don't think anyone would even look at me if I tried to approach them about becoming an investor in Formula 1. However, in 2017, it's when William Story and Rich Energy came into the Formula 1 sphere. First I saw of them was on a YouTube channel for Motorsport TV. It was Motorsport News. Don't think it exists anymore. But it was a show presented by a man called Peter Windsor, who again is a very well-respected member of the Formula 1 paddock. He's been around for decades, journalist, press officer. He was a press officer for Williams in the 1980s. He was actually in the passenger seat of the Ford Sierra, which was being driven by Frank Williams, which crashed and which led to Frank Williams sustaining the injuries, which left him in a wheelchair. I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm just trying to highlight who Peter Windsor is. Very well-respected member of the Formula 1 paddock. He was interviewing William Story on this show, and this is where William Story and Rich Energy made their intentions that they wanted to get into Formula 1 as either a team owner or as a title sponsor. Now, there's been plenty of people in the past who've claimed they wanted to do this and nothing ever came of it, but admittedly, William Story talked the talk on this show. He certainly had Peter Windsor convinced, and to be honest, me and other people who were watching the video were like, this guy talks the talk and maybe he can walk the walk. So his first approach to get into Formula 1 was to try and purchase the Force India Formula 1 team. Force India was originally Jordan, and when Jordan closed doors, it briefly became a team called Midland F1, then it became Spiker F1 briefly, and then it was bought out by a man called Vijay Mallya, an Indian businessman who's had his own financial difficulties. He ran it for a few seasons as Force India. His financial difficulties caught up with him on the Formula 1 team, and this is where Rich Energy were going to swoop in. They were going to buy the Formula 1 team. Again, where the money was coming from, God only knows, because this Rich Energy drink, you were able to buy it briefly on Amazon, very briefly. You were able to buy it through the website, very briefly. I think if you go onto the website now, it says it's under construction, and the product is out of stock, even though apparently I think they have hundreds of thousands of cans waiting to go to put the drink into. Anyway, where the money was coming from is the big question mark. But the deal to buy Force India almost looked like it was going to go through. He was seen walking around the paddock in Force India gear. But before Rich Energy and William Story had a chance to buy Force India F1, Sergio Perez, who was driving for them at the time, and who ironically is now driving for Red Bull, he and his team had the Force India team put into administration, and it was eventually saved by Lawrence Stroll, an actual successful multi-billionaire businessman and father of Lance Stroll, current Formula 1 driver, and it's now Aston Martin F1. So that whole deal was off the table. So Rich Energy and William Story's next move to try and get into Formula 1 was to woo Claire Williams and the Williams F1 team to become their title sponsor. To the extent where, again, he was seen knocking around the paddock in Williams regalia, walking around with Claire Williams. And the story goes there was a dinner arranged at a restaurant in downtown Austin to get this deal signed. There was Williams top brass there ready to sign the deal, but apparently Rich Energy and William Story just didn't turn up. And then, a couple of days later, it was announced, unbeknownst to anybody, that Rich Energy had signed a multi-million-dollar deal, again, where the money was coming from, God only knows, with the Haas F1 team. And this actually turned out to be true. January rolled around in 2019 and the car was launched. It was branded in Rich Energy, a lovely black and gold livery. Nothing original. Black and gold is a lovely colour combo, and in Formula One made legendary by Lotus with the John Player special liveries. But it looked cool. It was nice to have that colour scheme back on the grid. William Story was there. He was singing the praises of F1 and this partnership that they had, as were Gene Haas and Gunther Steiner, team principal and team owner. Then winter testing rolled around, and on the first day of winter testing, the Haas F1 team were actually faster than the Red Bull team, which led William Story going to Twitter. His Twitter voice became pretty infamous as years went on. Still is, actually. He started a hashtag saying better than Red Bull, which was kind of getting ahead of himself, because anyone who watches F1 knows you have to take testing times with a pinch of salt, especially the first day of testing. You don't know what people are doing. Times are a bit meaningless. And by the end of winter testing, Haas dropped down the order and Red Bull were at the top of the order. And that's kind of then how the Formula One season started. The Haas car wasn't particularly fast and it was pretty unreliable. And as the season started going on, William Story wasn't liking the fact that his Formula One team he'd invested in, again, where the money come from, we don't know. He turned to Twitter and started referring to the Haas Formula One car as a milk float, to the extent where he was photoshopping them in pictures of milk floats that were covered in the Haas F1 livery. That's not the kind of behaviour you're used to seeing in Formula One. Financial and political wranglings are usually done behind closed doors, and PR is all forward-facing, is all smiles, and everything's great. And that's how Haas approached it. They were like, no, look, everything is fine. The deal is great. We have a great relationship with Rich Energy. Everything is great. The next problem that cropped up then was the logo for Rich Energy. Rich Energy apparently was based in Richmond and London, and they claimed the logo for the company was based on the deer that roamed around Richmond Park in London. However, this logo that Rich Energy had was actually the logo of a well-established company called White Bikes, who make pretty high-end push bikes. So White Bikes weren't particularly happy with Haas F1 and Rich Energy using this logo. They took them to court. William Story was used as one of the key witnesses, talked a lot of bollocks on the stand. Therefore, the judge basically said, you're talking bollocks, ruled in favour of White Bikes, and they made the ruling that they could no longer use the logo and had to pay the financial costs, or the legal costs of White Bikes. To this day, White Bikes are still looking for those legal costs to be paid, which gives you an idea of the strange and mercurial nature of Rich Energy's finances. So then I think come the Canadian Grand Prix, the logo for Rich Energy was removed from the Formula One cars, and it just said Rich Energy rather than having the logo on the cars. Again, this is again where cracks really started to form. He kept bad mouthing the team on Twitter. The team were kind of like, don't know what he's talking about. Look, we have a multi-million-dollar contract. Everything is cushy. It's all good. Then the end of the season came along, and Haas F1 had enough with Rich Energy and William Story. The bills apparently weren't being paid. The money that they claimed they were going to pump into the Formula One team wasn't coming through. Surprise, surprise, because nobody knows where the money ever came from with Rich Energy. Ties were cut, and Haas F1 moved on. They've had other difficulties with sponsors since then, but that was it. Rich Energy and William Story were gone from F1. The story was short. Not that it stopped William Story from talking up how he was hard done by, his company was hard done by, that they were super successful, they were still going to try and come back into F1, blah, blah, blah. All his stakeholders in Rich Energy were not particularly happy with his behaviour, and he was sacked as CEO, and the company bought him out. He was no longer a stakeholder. The Rich Energy name was changed through Customs House. I think the name of the company was changed to something ambiguous, Lightning Bolt, I think it was called. Unfortunately, with the changing of the name, that left the Rich Energy name open to be bought back. And apparently, again, who knows where the money came from, William Storey bought back the Rich Energy name, and the company is technically still in existence. Apparently, he has another backer, a Serbian man called Zoran Čerzic. Sorry, Serbian is not one of the languages I speak. If you Google that man's name, it comes up as a Serbian man who is an Olympic volleyball coach. I don't know if it's the same person. The whole story is very strange. He's put up some videos since claiming he's still going to try and get into F1. They do currently sponsor a British Superbike team, and they also the title sponsor. It's Rich Energy BTC Racing, which is a British touring car team which have been around for, I think, since 2006. They even had Jason Plato driving from last year, and apparently that's still a thing. So again, where all this money's coming from, God only knows. There's a very good book. Unfortunately, I haven't read it because I have books that come up to my head that I haven't actually read yet, so I haven't bought this book. But there's a book called, let me get the name of it for you, Racing with Rich Energy, How a Rogue Sponsor Took Formula One for a Ride. It's a book written by Elizabeth Blackstock and Alanis King. If you want to get more information about this story, and this, they're obviously going to do a better job than I did. Apparently in the book, they still can't get to the bottom of where the finance came from. Anyway, Rich Energy. Who is it? What is it? Why am I making this video? Well, maybe it does exist. One moment. So it turns out it is real. I managed to find myself one. It was being stocked in a petrol station in Ashburn in County Meath in Ireland. I was shocked. I walked in and it was staring right at me. I couldn't believe it, so I had to buy it. Because while the finances and blah, 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 it's good to know the product does actually exist. So I think it'd be rude for me not to try it. I probably shouldn't be drinking an energy drink at 25 to 10 in the evening. But this is the sacrifices I make for making low budget and poor quality internet content. I hope you're as excited as I am. I've chilled it. It's ice cold, so you know I'm giving them all of the advantages to try and woo me. I've even chilled the glass I'm going to pour it into. We'll give it a smell test. It smells, unsurprisingly, like Red Bull. Ingredients: Rich Energy, high caffeine content. Not recommended for children or pregnant or breastfeeding women. That's good. Consume in moderation. Ingredients: what do we have? Water, sugar, glucose, acid, E numbers, caffeine, taurine, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so it smells like Red Bull, so we'll pour it out. Oh, surprise, surprise, it looks like Red Bull as well. Okay. Oh, this reminds me of going clubbing in the early 2000s. No, it's not actually that bad. It just tastes like Red Bull. Yeah, so there you go. Rich Energy, William Storey. I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll make some other low rent stuff, as I've mentioned in my shitty podcast which I don't listen to. I'm just testing the waters. I'll end this video with a short clip from William Storey, where he says a lot of things and says nothing at all. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.